When was the last time you won an argument against someone stupider than you? You can't remember because it never happened. And that silence in your head right now, that's the proof. You've been carrying logic like a sword into a war where the other side brought something far more dangerous. Something Machiavelli identified 500 years ago that no school ever taught you. No mentor ever warned you. And the people using it against you, they don't even know they're doing it. That's what makes it deadly. Watch every second of this, because the part that will rewire your brain completely comes at the end. Comment if you've ever lost to someone who should never have beaten you. Let me tell you what happened to you. Not what you think happened. What actually happened. You walked into that room, that conversation, that relationship, with everything on your side. Truth, clarity, evidence, the kind of preparation that should have made the outcome obvious. You weren't nervous, you weren't unprepared, you were ready, and you walked out smaller than when you entered, not defeated by someone stronger, not outmaneuvered by someone smarter, defeated by someone you actually pitied, someone you looked at and thought, this person cannot possibly beat me. And yet they did, completely, effortlessly, as if your preparation meant nothing, as if your logic was invisible, as if everything you brought into that room simply evaporated the moment they opened their mouth. That feeling, that specific, nauseating feeling, has a name. Machiavelli knew it. He studied it in royal courts, in political chambers, in the bloodiest power struggles of Renaissance Italy. He watched brilliant men fall repeatedly, not to other brilliant men, to performers, to manipulators, to people who weaponized something so simple, so primal, that logic had no answer for it. He called these people dangerous, not because of their intelligence, but because of their access to something intelligence cannot defend against without training. And here is the first truth you need to hold. You were never confused because you were weak. You were confused because you were never taught what was actually happening. Think about the last time it happened. Really think. You were calm, you were rational, you presented your case clearly, and somewhere in the middle of that, the other person shifted. Maybe they raised their voice, maybe their eyes filled with tears, maybe they suddenly became the victim of a conversation they started. And the room, the people watching, listening, judging, the room moved. Not toward truth, toward them. You stood there holding facts like a weapon no one could see, and they stood there bleeding, performing, and everyone saw that. That is not a coincidence. That is not bad luck. That is a mechanism, ancient, reliable, brutal, and almost completely invisible to the people it destroys most. Machiavelli wrote about power his entire life, but the chapter no one talks about, the observation buried beneath his politics and his strategy, was this: the most dangerous person in any power struggle is not the most intelligent. It is the one most willing to make others feel something, because feeling bypasses thinking every single time, in every room, in every century, without exception. You have spent your entire life being the most prepared person in rooms that were never judging preparation. You brought answers to a competition that was never asking questions. You showed up armed for a debate that was actually a performance. And now, for the first time, you are going to understand exactly what was taken from you, exactly how it was taken, and exactly what Machiavelli knew that will make sure it never happens again. Stay with this. Every part matters. Before we go any further, I need you to do something uncomfortable. I need you to stop seeing yourself as the victim of this story, not because you weren't wronged. You were. Not because the pain wasn't real. It was. But because the moment you lock yourself into the victim position, you hand them the weapon again. And this time you're giving it to them consciously. Here is the mirror Machiavelli would hold up to you right now. Your intelligence, the thing you've relied on your entire life, has been quietly working against you in every emotional confrontation you've ever had. Not because intelligence is weak, but because of what intelligence does to a person's behavior under pressure. Intelligent people believe in systems. They believe in fairness. They believe that if you present truth clearly enough, accurately enough, calmly enough, truth will win. that belief is not stupidity. That belief is actually a sign of a highly developed mind. But in the arena of emotional warfare, that belief is a death sentence. Here is what your intelligence trained you to do when attacked. It trained you to explain, because explanation leads to understanding, and understanding leads to resolution. That's logical. That's correct. In a world where everyone is operating rationally, but they are not operating rationally, it trained you to stay calm, because calm is mature. Calm is strong. Calm is the behavior of someone who is secure in their position. That's true in a room full of people evaluating behavior objectively. But the room is not evaluating objectively. It trained you to wait, because patience allows the truth to surface, because overreaction embarrasses itself, because time favors the correct position. All of that is true in a system designed to reward correctness. But the system in that room, the invisible system, rewards something else entirely. It rewards relatability. It rewards perceived suffering. It rewards whoever the audience can feel something for. And here is where the mirror gets brutal. The more intelligent you are, the less relatable you appear under pressure. Your composure reads as coldness. Your preparation reads as arrogance. Your calm reads as indifference, and their chaos, their tears, their raised voice, their performed victimhood reads as humanity. You look like the institution. They look like the person. And humans, regardless of century, regardless of culture, will always choose the person over the institution when emotion is in the room. Machiavelli watched this dynamic destroy the most capable men in Italy, men who deserved power, men who had earned it, men who had earned it, men who were objectively more qualified than the people who replaced them. And he reached a conclusion that he never softened, never apologized for, and never stopped believing: it is not enough to be right. You must be felt. That is not a cynical statement. That is the most practical piece of strategic intelligence ever written. And it has been sitting in his pages for 500 years, waiting for people like you to finally read it correctly. Your intelligence was never the problem. Your delivery of that intelligence in rooms that speak a different language was the problem. And delivery can be learned. Delivery can be mastered. Delivery can be turned into the most precise weapon you have ever carried. But first, you need to understand exactly what they are deploying against you. Because until you can name the weapon, you cannot defend against it. And until you can defend against it, you will keep losing to people who should never have beaten you once. 500 years before neuroscience had language for it, Machiavelli already understood the architecture of how human beings make decisions under emotional pressure. He didn't have brain scans. He didn't have research papers. He had courts. He had councils. He had rooms full of powerful people making catastrophically irrational decisions, and he watched every single one of them with the cold precision of a surgeon studying a body. What he observed, and what modern neuroscience has since confirmed in extraordinary detail, is this: when emotion enters a room, the human brain does not upgrade its processing, it downgrades it. Here is what actually happens inside every observer's mind the moment someone becomes emotional in a confrontation. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational evaluation, for weighing evidence, for logical decision-making, begins to quiet, not shut down completely. But its authority in that moment is dramatically reduced, and the amygdala, the ancient primal part of the brain that processes threat and survival, takes over the room. And the amygdala does not ask who has the better argument. It asks who is in danger right now. It asks, where is the threat coming from? It asks, how do I make this uncomfortable feeling stop? The person crying, yelling, trembling, they trigger the amygdala's protection response in every observer. Not because observers are foolish, because they are human. Because millions of years of evolution have wired every human brain to respond to displays of distress with instinctive protective action. And you, calm, composed, logical, presenting your evidence, you trigger something else entirely. You trigger suspicion. Because in the language of the amygdala, The language every observer is involuntarily speaking in that moment. A person this calm while someone else is this distressed must be the cause of the distress. You look dangerous, they look damaged, and the room protects the damaged every time, without a single conscious decision being made. Machiavelli articulated this in his observation of court dynamics with a precision that would make modern psychologists uncomfortable with how much he knew. He noted that rulers who displayed suffering, even performed suffering, consistently outmaneuvered advisors who displayed competence. Not because suffering was respected, but because it was felt. And in rooms where decisions are made by humans, feeling outranks, thinking in the moment of decision, this is why your logic never landed the way it should have. This is why your evidence was ignored. This is why the most prepared person in the room keeps walking out having lost to the most dramatic person in the room. It was never a fair fight. It was never designed to be. And the people defeating you, most of them, are not even doing it deliberately. That is the most disturbing part of everything in this video. Most of the people who have used emotional flooding to defeat you were not running a calculated strategy. They were not thinking 3 moves ahead. They were simply feeling, loudly, publicly, dramatically, and the human brain of everyone in that room did the rest automatically, which means you have been losing, repeatedly, painfully, confusingly, to people who were not even trying to defeat you. They just felt, and the room responded, and you lost. Machiavelli's response to this observation was not despair, it was not cynicism, it was engineering. He began to study not how to make better arguments, but how to make arguments that the emotional brain could receive. How to walk into rooms and speak 2 languages simultaneously, the language of logic for the minds that were still available, and the language of feeling for the minds that had already been hijacked. That dual fluency, that is what we are building in you right now, the story that will haunt you. I want to tell you a story. Not a metaphor, not a hypothetical, a pattern so consistent across history, across cultures, across centuries, that once you see it, you will never unsee it, and you will start recognizing it everywhere. In your past, in your present, in rooms you haven't even walked into yet. Picture Florence, 1498. A man stands before a council of powerful men. He is arguably the most intelligent political mind of his generation. His analysis is precise. His recommendations are sound. His track record of accurate prediction is unmatched by anyone in that room. He presents his case with the clarity and composure of someone who has done nothing wrong, because he hasn't. Across from him stands someone with far less intelligence, far less evidence, far less credibility, but this person has something else. A story, a performance, a carefully constructed emotional narrative in which they are the injured party and the intelligent man is the cold, calculating threat. The council, educated men, experienced men, men who should know better, sides with the performance. The intelligent man loses everything. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli, and a lesson he took from that destruction was not bitterness, it was education. He spent the rest of his life reverse engineering exactly what had happened in that room, exactly which mechanisms had been activated, exactly which weapons had been used against him, and exactly how a person of genuine intelligence could walk into those rooms and never be destroyed by performance again. Now replace Florence with your office. Replace the council with your team. Replace the political chamber with your family dinner table. The story is identical. You came with truth. They came with feeling. And the room that should have known better, chose feeling. You walked away not just defeated but bewildered. Because you knew you were right, and somehow being right didn't matter at all. This pattern has a name in behavioral psychology. It's called the empathy override. The moment when emotional resonance in a social setting completely overrides the group's capacity for rational evaluation. The group doesn't stop being intelligent. They stop being able to access that intelligence because the emotional signal in the room is too loud. And here is what makes this pattern so devastatingly effective against specifically intelligent people. Intelligent people trust the process. They trust that if they stay calm, the room will reward calm. They trust that if they present evidence, the room will evaluate evidence. They trust that if they maintain dignity, dignity will be respected, and every single one of those trusts gets weaponized against them because the room is not rewarding calm. The room is interpreting calm as absence of feeling, and absence of feeling as absence of humanity, and absence of humanity as the profile of someone capable of causing harm. Machiavelli wrote in his private letters something that his public works only hinted at. He wrote that the cruelest irony of intelligence is that it produces in its owner the precise behaviors that make them appear guilty to an emotionally activated crowd. Composure looks like coldness. Preparation looks like premeditation. Clarity looks like manipulation. And meanwhile, the person across from you who is crying, trembling, performing, they look like the most honest person in the room. Because raw emotion reads as unfiltered truth to a brain that has been hijacked by its own survival instincts, you were not just fighting them. You were fighting the neurology of every person watching, and no one told you. That changes right now. The 3 traps. Every intelligent person who has ever lost to emotional warfare fell into at least one of 3 traps. Most fell into all 3 simultaneously without realizing any of them were traps until it was already over. Understanding these traps is not just academic. It is the difference between walking into the next confrontation with your eyes open and walking in the same way you always have, prepared for a debate, arriving at a destruction. The explanation trap. This is the most common trap and the most fatal. The moment you are emotionally attacked, accused, misrepresented, undermined, your intelligent mind immediately moves to correct the record. You begin to explain. You provide context. You clarify what actually happened, what was actually said, what was actually meant. You do this because explanation is how intelligent people resolve misunderstanding. It is a completely rational response to an irrational attack, and it destroys you completely. Here is what explanation communicates to an emotionally activated room. Guilt. Not because you are guilty, but because in the emotional language the room is currently speaking. The only people who explain themselves are the people who have something to explain. Innocent people. In the narrative structure, the emotional brain automatically constructs. Don't clarify, they assert, they don't explain, they stand firm. Your explanation, however accurate, however necessary, however brilliantly constructed, signals to every observer that you are on the defensive. And the defensive position in emotional warfare is the losing position. Always. Machiavelli observed this trap consuming brilliant men repeatedly and noted, "The man who justifies himself to his accusers has already confirmed their accusation in the minds of the crowd." The patience trap. Intelligent people believe in time. They believe that if they wait, if they allow the emotion to run its course, reason will eventually reassert itself. The truth will surface. The performance will be recognized for what it is, and the room will correct itself. This belief is not wrong in isolation. Time does often reveal truth, but time in an emotional confrontation does not work the way intelligent people assume it does. Emotion moves at the speed of feeling. It lands in seconds. It reshapes the room's perception in moments. By the time you have decided to wait it out, the narrative has already been written. The roles have already been assigned. You are already the villain in a story that the room has collectively agreed upon, not through discussion, not through evaluation, but through the instantaneous social bonding that shared emotional experience creates. You waited for the truth to win the room. The room had already left. The dignity trap. This is the most insidious trap because it is dressed in genuine virtue. You refuse to lower yourself. You refuse to perform. You refuse to manufacture emotion. You don't feel or exaggerate emotion. You do feel, because that would be dishonest. That would be manipulation. That would make you exactly what they are. And you are better than that. That nobility, that authentic, principled refusal to weaponize emotion costs you the room every single time. Not because virtue is weakness, but because in a room that is currently operating on emotional logic, restraint is invisible. It doesn't register as strength. It doesn't register as integrity. It simply doesn't register. You become background, you become furniture. You become the silent, correct, irrelevant person in the corner while the performance happening in the center of the room writes the history of what just occurred. Machiavelli was not asking you to abandon dignity. He was asking you something far more precise. Are you deploying your dignity at the right moment, in the right room, in front of the right audience? Dignity in a room of rational people is power. Dignity in a room of emotionally activated people is invisibility. Know the room. Choose the weapon accordingly. What the masters do differently. Everything changes here. Understanding the wound was only preparation. Now comes control. Masters follow a precise sequence. First, shrink the arena. Emotional attacks rely on an audience. Without witnesses, the performance loses power. Masters calmly move the conversation into private space, framing it as respect, not retreat. Remove the crowd, and the weapon weakens instantly. Second, name what's happening, not with aggression, but precision. I see this matters to you. I want to understand what you need. This acknowledges emotion without feeding it, shifting the frame from conflict to clarity. Third, become still, not cold, grounded, unshaken. The kind of calm that signals total control. Because rooms don't follow noise, they follow the most stable presence, and the one who remains still the longest controls everything. The shift that changes everything. Everything before this was diagnosis. This is control. There is one shift that separates those who lose emotional confrontations from those who never lose again. Stop trying to win the argument. Niccolò Machiavelli never tried to win arguments. He controlled what they were about. When you argue to win, you accept their frame, their battlefield, their rules. You fight on ground they've prepared, but when you reframe, you move the terrain entirely. This is reframing, the most powerful conversational advantage. Instead of defending, shift the question. The real issue isn't who's right, it's what we both want moving forward. You don't resist, you relocate, and suddenly their emotional attack has nothing to hit. In public, use precision. This matters. Let's handle it properly in the right space. You remove the audience, shift perception, and take control. Because control isn't loud. It's calm, deliberate, and undeniable. Stop answering their questions. Start deciding what gets asked. That's the game. We've come far, so let's end with truth. Idiots don't have power. They never did. What they have is access to your blind spots, to emotional triggers, to social dynamics that reward performance over logic. Close the blind spots and the access disappears. Understand the mechanism and it loses power. Learn the game and you stop losing it. Niccolò Machiavelli didn't teach manipulation. He built protection for minds that were unprepared for emotional warfare. You weren't losing because you were weak. You were playing the wrong game. And once you truly understand that game, anger disappears. Not because it was okay, but because it's useless. What protects you is awareness. What protects you is preparation. A prepared mind cannot be ambushed. Now you see clearly. No confusion, no surprise, no shrinking, just calm recognition and the right move. That's not arrogance, that's control. Now you know. If this video changed something in how you see the world, don't let that change stay private. Share this with one person in your life who is brilliant, who works hard, who deserves to win, and keeps losing to people beneath them. They have been waiting for this without knowing it existed. Follow this channel, because what comes next is darker, deeper, and more useful than anything in this video. And before you go, drop one word in the comments. Just one word, the word that describes what shifted in you while you watched this. One word. Right now, below. That comment, that single word tells me you're ready for what comes next.